Alrighty, well, hopefully you had some good conversations around your table, just kickstarting this off. A reminder, we're going to have 2 more segments where you get to have some group conversation around your tables around this topic. Well, if you're new with us, the Underground Sessions is a place we discuss challenging topics. And many times, the reason things are challenging topics is because they're close to home. So when it comes to family issues have a way of causing emotions to bubble or explode onto the surface. Marriage, divorce, children, mommy and daddy, and their impact on your life, good or bad. In fact, even as I say those words, something inside you reacts. And so the topic of children's rights gets to the heart of these issues. And I have to admit, this topic has become more real for me as I've had my own children, but even in that, I realize that the right of a child to their mother and father, well, that's actually hit home to me since I was very young. It's hit home to me in a particularly deep way tonight, because tonight is April 2nd, 2022. And you may say, well, Pastor Bob, that's obvious. Today, April 2nd is the day. But for me, April 2nd is the day every year where I pause and take stock of life. Because you see, April 2nd is the day that my father died unexpectedly from a heart attack. April 2nd, 1992. Tonight is the 30th anniversary of my father's death. And it's extra poignant for me because this year I turned 40, and that was the same age he was when he died. So if you're doing the math, that was 30 years ago, I was 10 years old. And at his death, it wasn't his fault, but it left a gaping hole in my heart. And I spent many of my formative years, my teenage years, without my dad. Others tried to step in, other men tried to help, but it was never the same as my dad. Now, I had a good relationship with my father. He was my hero. But I suspect some listening tonight or listening later on to this did not have a good relationship with their father or do not have a good relationship with their father. Maybe he was abusive, or he left, or he didn't show you any love. In either case, Dad made an impact. And the reason it hurt is because he was your father and is your father. Now, my mother raised me as a single mom, and she also was my hero. And tonight, I got to tell you, the thought of losing my wife and having to raise my children alone, that's a daunting prospect. Because kids need moms and kids need dads. And this is what the topic of children's rights is about. And it's an emotional topic, let's be honest. One of the things I encourage you to do tonight is to, as much as you can, set emotions aside and listen with an open mind and perhaps 10-year-old eyes. Because as always, at our sessions, you might not agree with everything you hear. Maybe you won't agree with anything you hear. That's okay. But hopefully you will walk away challenged and think more deeply about this crucial topic. Our speaker tonight is Katy Faust. She's the founder of the organization Them Before Us, and she's also the author of a book of the same title, available at the Resource Center. I do recommend it. I have read it. In fact, I didn't get to tell you, I have 27 pages of notes from my Kindle from reading your book. It's the only organization solely devoted to children's rights in family structure. Katy did her undergraduate degree in political science and Asian studies at St. Olaf College, which I forgot to ask you. This is going to date me. St. Olaf is where Rose was from in the Golden Girls, right?
Got it,
okay,
baby.
I'm sure you get that
You
all the
got
time.
it.
It dawned on me, all right? But she received a Fulbright scholarship to Taiwan, and her fluency in Mandarin assisted her when she worked with the largest Chinese adoption agency in the world. In 2012, Katy started blogging about why marriage is a matter of justice for kids. Maybe that's the way you have something you haven't thought about in that angle. Her articles have appeared in numerous publications. She has filed 3 amicus briefs supporting children's rights and advocated for rights of children with lawmakers in the U.S. and abroad, as well as at the United Nations. And she currently appears in a video series called Dear Katy, which offers advice on how to live with sexual integrity in the midst of morally permissive cultures. And most importantly, maybe she's married and she's the mother of 4 children, the youngest of whom is adopted from China. And so, Katy, we're very excited to have you here at the Underground Sessions. Welcome. We'll give you the stage.
Thanks. Thank you. Very, very glad to be here. I really like New Jersey. I mean, I didn't come until 5 years ago, and I was like, what's up with all the Jersey jokes? Because I'm like, this is really nice. It's pretty here. I think your weather is really good. You have this thing that we don't have in Seattle called sunshine. And so it's been great being here for the weekend. I love it. Thank you for having me. This is a difficult topic. This is a difficult topic for everybody. There's nothing I'm going to talk about tonight that probably has not affected you somehow in your life, very likely, very deeply. Okay, so I understand that this is really sensitive, and actually, it's because this is so sensitive that I think a lot of us kind of stay out of it for a long time. So that was me, right? 10 years ago. I was not a children's rights activist. I was not flying anywhere to speak to anybody about anything. I was just raising 4 kids in Seattle. But what got me into this is in 2012, President Obama evolved on the topic of marriage, right? When he ran for president in 2008, he supported traditional marriage, but then he evolved. And as soon as he supported gay marriage, a huge shift took place in media. Like that week, right afterwards, every news outlet that I listened to suddenly felt free to like play the bigot card, right? If you don't support gay marriage, you are a bigot. You hate gay people. You're homophobic. And that was a problem for me because I love gay people. So do you. Right? I mean, almost everybody I know who supports traditional marriage also loves the gay people in their life. And for me, that was especially evident because my parents were married until I was 10, and then they divorced. And then after that, my father dated and remarried, but my mother repartnered with a woman, and they've been together ever since. So after their divorce, I split time between their 2 homes, right? At my dad's house or then at the home of my mother and her partner. So part of my childhood, I kind of grew up into that world. I do not consider my mother's partner to be my mother, but I do consider my mother's partner to be my friend. And I'm very, very serious about loving the people in our life who experience same-sex attraction or who identify as LGBT. So I was a little miffed at this accusation that bigotry was behind support for traditional marriage. The other thing that I heard the pro-gay marriage camp saying is kids don't care if they have 2 moms or 2 dads. That is another problem, because what that means is kids don't care if they have lost their mom or dad. When you're looking at a picture of a child with 2 dads, you're looking at a picture of a child with a missing mother. And when you're looking at a picture of a child with 2 moms, you're looking at a picture of a child with a missing father. Now, my husband and I had been doing youth ministry for a couple decades at that point. We actually went to Denver Seminary, the same place that Pastor Bob went, Ryan did. And I remember those times when we were in Colorado and you're in the middle of the church lock-in, right, with all of the kids in the gym, and at 3 o'clock in the morning when everybody else is asleep, that one kid that's awake and talking to you, what is he talking to you about? Where is my dad? Why did he leave? I've never known my mother. Why did she prefer drugs over me? I had never yet met a kid who lost their mom or dad who was not at minimum curious. But most of these kids, they would say, that is the deepest wound in my life. That is the hardest burden that I have to bear. So to me, this narrative that kids don't care if they've lost their father or mother, used to advance a political goal, was the thing that broke me, right? That is the thing that finally said, okay, I am willing to lose friends over speaking up about this, because I am a peacekeeper, right? On the truth teller, grace giver spectrum, I am the grace giver. I just want there to be peace, but not peace at the expense of the fundamental well-being of kids, right? So that was unacceptable to me. So that's when I started writing about marriage and family. And when I started writing, especially about marriage, studying it, like critiquing different news headlines and things like that coming out about the marriage debate, what I realized is the whole conversation about the definition of marriage was obsessively focused on what adults wanted. That's all it was about. My longing, my loss, my dreams, my hopes, with whom I share love and connection. The kids were not even a part of the conversation unless they validated what the adults wanted, right? That's the only time they were kind of brought into the issue. Then the more I researched about all the different marriage and family issues, from no-fault divorce to the promotion of same-sex parenting, to cataloging the stories of children created through egg donation and sperm donation and surrogacy, to reading the stories and watching documentaries of kids who were raised in polygamous homes. That's what I found. The the same narrative, if the adults are happy, the kids will be happy, right, is what drove every single one of those issues when it came to cultural conversations or decisions in our courts related to personal decisions about what do I do in my struggling marriage, or I'm single and I want to have a baby, or I experience same-sex attraction and want to have a family. That narrative of my happiness is the most important thing, and if I'm happy, the kids will be happy, was the dominant factor in all of these conversations about marriage and family. Now, that is a problem. It's a problem because children have rights. And when I say that to conservative groups, most of them are like, whoa, girl. We've heard about children's rights, and we don't want any of that business, right? Because if you Google children's rights, what you're going to see is maybe children's rights to sexual pleasure, right? That children have a right to sexual pleasure, and we have international curriculums funded by organizations like the UN and the World Health Organization promoting a child's right to sexual pleasure. We've got children's rights to privacy, right, that are used as the justification for hiding a child's transgender identity from their parents at school, okay? So the other side has absolutely adulterated the term children's rights and used it wrongly. But children actually do have rights, rights that can be discovered through reason, natural law, rights that are validated, for example, through the most widely ratified treaty in the world, the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. And a child's primary right is what? What do you think? What do you think their primary right is? That's number 2. To what? Life. Their right to life is their primary right. You know that through common sense, natural law, even the 5 major religions of the world, right, agree that children should not be killed, okay? But children have rights on this side of the womb as well. And that next right is the right to be known and loved by the 2 people responsible for their existence, okay? That is also something that is agreed upon by the 5 major religions of the world. So I started to advocate and look at every marriage and family issue through the perspective of a child's right to their mother and father, and something incredible happens. You get the right policy decisions, and you get the right personal decisions when you center that conversation around, what about the kid? Okay. Now the problem is that makes demands of every adult. Okay, every adult, single, married, gay, and straight, has to conform to this fundamental child right. And for probably most of us in this room, that is going to be difficult, at least at some point in our life. And that's what we're going to talk about, right? All these issues that we're going to talk about tonight. The solution, the main thread that runs through all of them is someone's going to have to do the hard thing. Is it going to be the kid, or is it going to be the adult? We think it should be the adult. But the world is telling you, oh, it's the kids. Make them do the hard thing. So what I'm going to do is I am just going to walk you through the 10 chapters of my book so you can kind of get an idea of what we're talking about tonight. Because Pastor Bob's going to ask me some questions, but what I really want is your hardest questions. I want to answer the hardest questions you have about all these issues, the things that you don't know what to say if somebody asks you in a conversation or on social media or whatever. So first of all, chapter 1, children have rights, okay? Just like you all understand that a child has a right to life, that is a child's primary right. It is a natural right. It is discoverable through natural law, and that child has that right whether or not our legal system recognizes it. And that's what all of us that are fighting abortion are doing. We're saying because the child has a natural right to life, we believe that that right should be reflected in our laws, in our civil laws, right? So children also have a right to their mother and father. It is a natural right. It's discoverable through natural law. And even if our courts and our laws don't recognize it, we should advocate for our civil law to recognize it because, as Martin Luther King Jr. says, right, like all of a law that is not aligned with natural law is not a just law. And unfortunately, we are creating a lot of unjust laws when it comes to a child's right to their mother and father. So here's the incredible thing about this fundamental child right, a child's right to their own mother and father. Sometimes when I'm kind of talking to different audiences, I'll say, like, here's a few issues, like teen homelessness, child poverty, teen suicide, teen pregnancy. If you could solve one of those, which one would you solve? If you could just solve one of them, what would it be? And any of you guys, anything that I just said there, which one would you solve? Raise your hand if it would be teen suicide. Is that the one you'd fix? Raise your hand if it would be teen poverty, or like child poverty. No more child poverty. Yeah? Okay, good. Raise your hand if you could just be like no girls getting pregnant, no teens pregnant. Yeah, that would fix a lot of the abortion issue. Yeah. What about teen homelessness? Would anybody? Did I already ask that? Who would just wipe out teen homelessness completely? Yep. Yeah. Right. So I tell people, for me, it's really hard to choose. Right? Like, I don't want any of that. I just want to solve all of it. And what we have right now is we have a government that is spending hundreds of millions, probably at this point close to billions of dollars if you're looking at the war on poverty, to eradicate these major social issues that we're facing today, right? And then I tell people, like, what if you could do one thing and it fixed everything? And what if it was really affordable? Would you do that? And they're like, there's no such thing. And I'm like, oh, there is. There is. And it's defending children's rights to their mother and father. Because when you look at all the major social issues that we are facing today, fatherless children overpopulate every single one of those issues. 90% of kids who live on the streets did not have a dad in their home. Children are 4 times more likely to live in poverty if they don't live with their dad. Right? 71% of girls who become teen moms did not have a dad in their home. 63% of teens that commit suicide are fatherless. Every issue that you're looking at, like down to incarceration rates, 70 to 85% of men that are in prison didn't have a father in the home. Like, you give me a social issue and I will show you kids that did not have their right to their mother and father protected. So this is, other than a child's right to life, this is the major battle of our time. So why is this natural right so powerful? Why does it have the ability to decimate every social issue that we are facing today? And I will give you 3 reasons. The first one is that biology matters. Okay, biology matters in the life of a child. Okay, if you can protect this natural right, you give children their biological mother and father. And we will talk about adoption, right, for all of you guys, because that's what happens. Like I say, biology matters, and then all the adoptive parents in the room are like, are you against adoption? And I promise you I'm not. I'm an adoptive mom, so we will totally get to that. But when we're talking about family structure, biology matters. Okay, why? Because statistically, biological parents are the safest, most connected to, most protective of, and most invested in their children, right? And these days, people will say, well, kids don't need biological parents. They just need to be safe and loved, right? And actually, we'll do a quick thought experiment. For those of you guys that have cell phones, pull them out. And you guys, good, you already have them out because you're going to text the questions in. But a few of you guys get on Google or DuckDuckGo or whatever it is, and a couple of you guys, I want you to Google the words mother's boyfriend. Okay, Google the words mother's boyfriend. Because the idea is that any two will do, right? Biology doesn't matter. This is the biggest objection that I get, right? Kids don't need biological parents. Hey, there's abusive biological parents out there, don't you know? Yes, I do. But they'll say, no, kids just need to be safe and loved, right? So, okay, well, if that's the case, then all it takes is for somebody to be in a romantic relationship with a child's parent, and they should be fine, okay? So that's what mother's boyfriend is. So who Googled mother's boyfriend? Anybody? Give me your top 2 hits.
They're awful.
Okay. Well, whatever you feel like you can say out loud, say out loud.
Oh, not that one.
Okay.
Not that one.
Okay.
I mean, it's beatings and death.
Beatings, death.
And boyfriend is to blame. Or
Yep.
is accused.
Good. What'd you see, Amanda?
Why are mothers' boyfriends so likely to kill?
Mm-hmm.
I survived teen attacked by mother's boyfriend.
Mm-hmm. Good. What did you guys find?
Las Vegas boy found dead in freezer.
Mm-hmm.
Boyfriend arrested.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it'll go on like that for pages and pages and pages and pages. You guys have the blessing of growing up and being steeped in a worldview and under the authority of a God that says, don't you touch those kids. But for those of people who don't have that kind of conviction, biology functions as a natural safeguard, a protective safeguard for children. Biology does that. Now, this has been observed even among evolutionary biologists, and they have coined a term called the Cinderella Effect. And it's exactly what it sounds like. It is that step-parents or unrelated adults in the home are more likely to mistreat a child. This is an undisputed phenomenon in the social science world, that biology functions as a critical measure of protection for child well-being. I'm going to pause here and say, I know heroic step-parents. I know step-parents who are filling in the gap of a negligent biological parent, and thank God for them. Thank God that they are serving to be the father that that child deserved when their biological father wanted to act like a child. And so we can recognize, and we should recognize, the exceptions when it comes to biology. But the rule is that biology serves as a critical marker for child safety and well-being. Why else is this child right so critical to kids? Number 2 is these two adults alone furnish something to kids that they crave, and that is biological identity. So this probably doesn't matter a whole lot to you if you grew up knowing both your mother and father. But for kids who were adopted, and now kids who are created through third-party reproduction, that is, a third party was used to conceive them, a donor sperm, a donor egg, or a surrogate, right? What we know now about these kids is they disproportionately struggle with identity issues. They have a very hard time answering the question, who am I? Who's a member of my family, right? More than half of them would say my sperm donor is half of who I am. They are disproportionately likely to struggle with something called genealogical bewilderment, where they look in a mirror and they feel like they're looking at an alien. They can't place the features on their face. Adoptees have been noting this for a while. Interestingly, adoptees fare better. The one study we have comparing outcomes for adoptees and donor-conceived kids show that adoptees fare better. Why? Because adoptees, both of them have experienced parental loss. Both of them have suffered a parental wound. Neither of them are being raised by both mother and father. But the adoptees fare better because they're being raised by adults who are seeking to mend their wound. And children created through third-party reproduction are being raised by people who inflicted the wound, who chose for their parent to be gone. So the adoptive parent is more able to discuss, grieve, and process their loss with their parent. And children created through third-party reproduction very often have to hide it and suffer alone. And sometimes those questions aren't welcome. But if we look at adoptees and donor-conceived kids, we see that biology matters because they want to know those two people that contributed their genetic material. This is why in the adoption world, in the last 50 years, we've gone from almost all adoptions being closed adoptions to today, 95% of adoptions are open adoptions. The child has some kind of knowledge or interaction or communication with their first family. Because social workers have recognized that even if kids cannot be raised by their biological mother and father, they benefit from as many connections as possible with their biological kinship network. Okay, so number 1 is safety. Number 2 is identity. Number 3, if we can defend this fundamental child right, the third thing that kids get is the perfect gender balance in the home every time. So it's fascinating to me that our friends on the left have decided that it's very, very important to have a female voice, for example, on the Supreme Court, right? They really believe that women have something distinct to contribute in that institution. There's many countries that have quotas in terms of the number of women that can serve in their parliament or in their legislature. California has passed laws saying that there needs to be at least one woman on every corporate board for a publicly held entity, okay? Because something about women is really, really important in those institutions. And yet, those same people have relentlessly campaigned to destroy the one institution that gets the gender balance exactly right every time, and that's the institution of marriage. Marriage is the most child-friendly institution the world has ever known. Not because it validates, oh, you're kidding me, only 10 minutes left? Somebody fire her. Wow. Wow. Okay. Marriage is the most child-friendly institution the world has ever known, not because it validates how adults feel, but because it unites the two people to whom children have a natural right. And there's no other adult relationship that does that. Okay? Marriage also not just brings mother and father together, but it does it for life. Because kids don't just need their mom and dad for 2 months or 2 years or 12 years, they need them forever, right? So that's chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4. We're doing 6 through 10 rapid fire, okay? So chapter 6, we talk about divorce. And I actually hadn't done as much research on divorce before I wrote the book, and I was stunned at we've had divorce for a while, and we've been able to study the outcomes. We've got a lot of data on kids of divorce. And the short answer is it impacts their physical health, their mental health, their emotional health, their academic health, and even their future relational health for life. There are some divorces that are justified, right? I mean, we know cases of abuse, abandonment, adultery, addiction, where the best thing for the child is to be separated from a negligent or unhealthy parent. But that's not the majority of divorces today. 70% of divorces today break up low conflict marriages, right? Not these screaming, abusive, pictures that we have it's adults that are not able to or not willing to work out their financial issues or their communication problems or the porn addiction or whatever it is, right? Same-sex parenting, we've talked a little bit about that. Chapter 6 is same-sex parenting. And what we see, especially in this demographic of kids, is what we call father hunger and mother hunger. So it does take more than just 2 adults. This is not just about making sure there's always somebody to do their homework or enough people like saving for college or whatever it is. Kids actually crave the love of a man and the love of a woman. And interestingly, God required, or nature required, however you want to look at that, for a man and woman to both participate in the baby-making activity. And then God's revealed law, as well as most civil laws throughout history, have required that man to commit to that woman prior to the baby-making activity and then stay together for life. Because mom is automatically connected to the baby. Like, you got to cut a cord, right, if you're going to separate mom and baby. So then we had to figure out there's no cord connecting dad, but the baby suffers when dad isn't there. And so we created a cultural and legal cord. Because what every society simultaneously throughout the world and all throughout history realized is if you can connect dad to mom, you automatically connect dad to baby. So marriage serves that purpose, right? Divorce severs that connection, and same-sex marriage works in reverse of that natural law definition of marriage. Now, marriage used to unite a child's mother and father almost 100% of the time. Now, if a child is raised in a same-sex marriage, they will be excluded from their mother and father 100% of the time, right? So these two things are not the same. And the child experiences mother hunger if they're raised by 2 dads, or father hunger if they're raised by 2 moms. Even if they're incredible parents, my mother, best mother ever. I mean, whatever I do well as a mother, I do just because that's how my mother parented me. But my mother and her partner could not be my father. And thank God they didn't try. Thank God I still had a relationship with my father all my life. The kids that didn't get that suffered. So chapter 6, we've got about 30 stories of kids that were raised in same-sex parented homes, and read them for yourself. See how that goes for you. Chapter 7 is all about sperm and egg donation. I say donation because this is not a nonprofit business, right? There is no donation. It is buying and selling. It is shopping. Get online right now, those of you guys that didn't participate in the last Google challenge, and Google egg donor catalog. I don't want to see one of your hands. Put your hand down. No, put it down. Okay. Shop for your child's mother and father. There are sperm donor catalogs, there are egg donor catalogs. You can purchase the genetic material for your designer baby. And the kids are not well, right? About 50% of the children created through third-party reproduction say, it troubles me that money changed hands. And 50% say, the circumstances of my conception bother me. More than 50% say, my sperm donor is half of who I am. Many of them would say, I think about this once a day. So we've put their stories in the book too. We've got about 30 of them. And it's very common for these kids to think obsessively, who is my mother? Does she know I exist? Do you think she would love me if she did? Have I passed her on the street? Does she play the piano like I do? Right? This is not inconsequential to children. You're upending their entire life and identity. Chapter 8, we talk about surrogacy. This is a hard one for Christians because we love babies. Raise your hand. Do you love babies? We love babies. And unfortunately, many of us think surrogacy is just about helping people have babies. That is not what surrogacy is. Surrogacy is about on-demand designer babies shipped worldwide. Surrogacy is a baby manufacturing process, okay? Surrogacy always involves IVF, making children in laboratories, and only 7% of lab-created babies will ever be born alive. 93% of babies created outside of a woman's body will spend their life in a freezer, will be deemed non-viable and discarded, will be deemed the wrong sex and discarded, will not survive the thaw, will not survive the transfer, or will be selectively reduced, that is, aborted. Because when you are paying 6 figures for a child, abortion functions as quality control and quantity control. So very few babies are going to make it through the gauntlet of surrogacy. And when they do, they often go home. They will always lose a relationship with their birth mother, the woman to whom they have bonded for 9.5 months, the only person they know in the entire world. And we know from children adopted at birth that children suffer a primal wound from that. Adoptees have long reported that severed attachment made it hard for them to attach in the future and trust in the future. But very often these babies also go home to houses where there's no woman at all. Surrogacy has enabled, for the first time since our species began, the intentional manufacturing of motherless children. Fatherlessness has not worked out well for our country, and we are about to see what it looks like to have intentional mother loss too. So chapter 9, we talk about adoption. And we spend a lot of time contrasting adoption and reproductive technologies because a lot of people think, well, this is just the same thing, right? It's just 2 different ways to, like, for people to form families, but it's not. These are really the exact opposites, okay? So a brief summary is adoption is a just society's response to children who have lost their parents, okay? If adoption is done well, the child is the client. If adoption is done well, every child that needs a loving home will find one. But not every adult who wants a baby is going to get one. Reproductive technologies are a marketplace centered around the desires of adults. So in adoption, when I was working at the adoption agency, it was all about the well-being of the child. They don't even use the words well-being of the child in reproductive technologies. Like, I've advocated against so many surrogacy contracts. They don't talk about the well-being of the child. They don't care. It's maximizing outputs for whatever money you're putting in and getting the baby that you want. So over here, part of evaluating the well-being of the child is forcing adoptive parents like me, and probably like a lot of you, to do months of screening and vetting and background checks. right? Because social workers are not fools. They understand. They know about mother's boyfriend. They know that they would lose their license, and rightly so, if they were to just give any adult a baby that had the money to pay the adoption fees. So they screen adoptive parents. Parents who create children through reproductive technologies don't clear any background checks. They don't have any references. Nobody goes to their house, right? There's no home study. The only check that has to clear is the check at the bank. You can have a criminal background, you can be credibly accused of child abuse, and you can walk out of that hospital with a child that you're not genetically related to at all. So reproductive technologies are a marketplace centered around the desires of adults. And so these two actually are the exact opposite. And it's very, very important for Christians especially to get this right, because there's way too much moral confusion, even among conservatives and Christians, about this topic. I don't know if you saw a week and a half ago, but Dave Rubin, who is a very popular host on the Blaze TV, a gay man, announced that he was having 2 surrogate-created children with his partner. And Prager University, the Blaze TV, Candace Owens, some members of the Daily Wire, all congratulated him. So we have to get this really straight, because even conservative elites seem to be a little confused about it. And then finally, the last chapter of our book is just about our children's rights movement. And the summary is, we expect all adults to do hard things. And because we're not just targeting the gays, or we're not just talking about reproductive technologies, because we insist that all adults sacrifice for the sake of children, we've been able to build a pretty incredible coalition of Baptists and Latter-day Saints and atheists and Catholics and Muslims, people who experience same-sex attraction themselves, people who were children of divorce, people that were wrongly divorced, people that were the cause of a divorce that they now regret, people who experience gender dysphoria. Because just like the pro-life coalition, if you're insisting that everybody protect the rights of child and you're not targeting any one group, that is a movement that a lot of people can get behind.